It was so hot. You didn't want to do anything. You didn't want to go outside. You didn't want to play. Well, I guess there's only one thing that was worth doing, and that was actually going fishing. Because down at where you could go fish, there was large trees with big branches. There's always a breeze. So two friends of mine, Charlie and Red, loved to go fishing. And so they went down to the river, and they were familiar with this particular river because that's a place where Charlie and Red had met one time before. But they went down to go fishing. And they'd sit on the bank there, under the trees, and they would cast their line and just waiting for that big fish that they'd always dreamed of to come along. Well, that particular day, nothing was biting. It was kind of slow, so they began to drift off talking about their summer. Charlie said, "You know what we're doing tomorrow?" Red said, "Yeah, I can't wait." He said, "We're going to camp." Charlie said, "Awesome, I can't wait to go to camp. I went last year, Silver Creek Camp. Yeah, it's located up in the mountains, and I can't wait to go back. There's so many things to do. They have arts and crafts, they swim, they play this game called Capture the Flag, they have a big bridge there, they get to sing a lot, they have arts and crafts, they love arts and crafts, that's why I said it twice, they love arts and crafts, they do all types of things." Well, Red said, "I can't wait to go. This will be my first year. I'm a little bit nervous." And Charlie said, "Don't be nervous. I'll be there. I've been there before. Any questions you have, I'll help you. I'll answer them all." Well, they began to talk about how they first met. And Red said, "You remember how you came down my road on your bicycle that day? And you rode up to my house, and I looked at you with a real mean kind of look to try to scare you?" Red said, "You know, I was really more afraid of you than I think you were of me." And he remembered the rest of that summer, because what took place that summer was when Charlie was down fishing one day, Red came up and grabbed this fishing pole that belonged to his dad, broke it, Charlie hid it, and then one day Charlie actually heard Red in the river. Well, that's a whole other story, maybe another time. But you know what? They began to think about how and why that happened. Red said, "You know, if that probably had not happened, me almost drowning in that river, I probably would never have come to know Christ." Because that summer, Red went off with Charlie to Vacation Bible School. And that's where he heard about Jesus Christ and how he could have a personal relationship with Jesus, how he could invite Jesus into his heart, and how Jesus would come in, live with him the rest of his life. And Charlie was so excited that he had had the opportunity to share that with Red. Then they began to talk about camp again. But as they talked about camp, all of a sudden, something was on the line. And Charlie said, was pulling, and it was pulling back. And he pulled it again, and it pulled back. He says, "This is a big one." And he pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled, and pulled, pulled. And finally, it comes near the top of the water. He was trying to get a glimpse of it. Wasn't quite sure how big it was, how long it was, or how much it weighed. But he pulled again, and one more time, one big pull, and boom, up out of the air it came, right at him. And plopped right in front of him. But it wasn't a fish. It was a big glob of grassy mud. And Red just laughed at him. "Nice one, Charlie. Good, give me a high five. Nice fish." Well, Charlie went over there and grabbed it, lifted it up by the string. And he lifted it up, and it was just ooey and gooey. And he stuck it back in the water, shook it a little bit, started taking the grass apart, and finally cleaned it off, washing it, and finally pulling everything off. And there on the end of his hook was a set of keys. Now, how in the world did he catch a set of keys? And how long had they been in the river? They didn't know. But they looked like older keys. That, long, skinny ones. And he counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 15 keys on this chain. And Charlie says, "Awesome, awesome. Nobody has anything like this." He said, "I know what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to take them to camp tomorrow." And Red said, "Why are you going to take them to camp?" He said, "Because nobody's going to have anything like this. When they ask me, I'll just tell them what happened, how I got them, and maybe we'll strike up a conversation, maybe we become friends." He didn't know. He said, "But I'm going to take them to camp." So off the boys went home after their fishing adventure. Back up the hill, down the road, got on their bikes, headed home, and that night they began to pack. Charlie was thinking about all the things he would need. Flashlight, bug spray, shorts, shoes, underwear, t-shirts, poncho, camera, hat, bandana, towel, swimsuit. He went through the whole list. And then he came to a place where it said other that he could fill in because he had this long list. He put keys. So he takes his keys and he plops them in the corner of his suitcase, puts all his clothes in, and he's ready to go. He goes and gets in bed and begins to think, what is summer camp going to be like to me? What's it going to be like this summer? And he began to think about a verse that he had heard in Sunday school. And the verse in Sunday school that the teacher had just left them with that day was the week before, love your enemies. Bless those that curse you. Do good to those that hate you. And pray for those that despitefully use you and persecute you. Loving your enemies. His teacher said, you know what, that's going to be one of the most difficult things for you to do. Because there will be people that don't like you. And your natural reaction, what you want to do is to not like them back. To respond negatively. To say something mean, ugly to them. And he says, Jesus says, love your enemies. Bless them. Do good to them. Pray for them. And Charlie began to think, I wonder at camp, am I going to have the opportunity to do that? His teacher said this thing that we call being a Christian is not easy to do. It's one of the toughest things to do. To try to live as Christ would live, to be obedient to his word, is going to be a challenge all of your life. But God promises his spirit, his love, his word, fellowship with others, instruction, worship, to help lead you and guide you in this thing of loving your enemies and living it out. Well, Charlie began to say that verse over and over because tonight he couldn't sleep. It was kind of like the night before Christmas, Christmas Eve. You know, you're sitting there in bed, you're thinking about maybe getting up the next morning and opening presents. You can't go to sleep, and he could not go to sleep. And so he says the verse over and over in his mind, and finally he drifts slowly, finally off to sleep. There comes a little tug at his shoulder. He kind of ignored it. Another tug at his shoulder. It was the next morning already. And his mom said, Charlie, it's time to get up and go to Sunday school. And Charlie goes, yes, Sunday school. Well, he really wasn't thinking about Sunday school. He's thinking about going to camp after church. But he knew he had to go to Sunday school first, then church, and then off he'd go. So he was packed and ready, and they loaded up into the church bus. Everybody gathered into the parking lot. They had prayer for the group that was leaving. And off they went in the church bus to Silver Creek Camp. It took about an hour to get there. It was just outside of town, up on the edge of the mountains. And as they were winding down the road, the scenery became familiar. They began to see again things that they always seen before. Charlie had seen this summer before. An Exxon gas station. A long curve and barbed wire fence. Just around a little house nestled right on the road. And then all of a sudden, this open area. Then heavy woods and a creek that flowed by. And they knew they were close to Silver Creek Camp. And Charlie jumped up, ooh, and kind of laid out a yell. The bus driver raised his voice and said, sit down, young man. Kind of surprised Charlie. Kind of scared him a little bit. And he plopped back down. As they got closer and closer, all of a sudden he sees a sign. It says Silver Creek Camp. Charlie jumps up again. We're here, we're here. The bus driver says, sit down, young man. He plops down, going, kind of muttering under his breath. He wasn't mad. He was just disappointed he hadn't obeyed what the bus driver had said. So now they pull into the driveway. And off in the distance, he sees all the camp buildings. They're white with green roofs. And one of those had on the side of it registration. Charlie said, Red, that's where we go to pay our money and to sign up. Listen to me. I'll tell you everything you need to know. You've got to get up in the morning at 7:15. We got to do our memory verse. We got to clean our cabins. We got to go to our Bible studies. We got to go to activities. And Charlie said, just slow down. I think we'll have time to go through all this. Let's just go get registered first. So they jumped off the bus. Charlie had packed a lot of stuff. So did Red. And they had to carry that stuff down the gravel walkway all the way to register in the main office. Finally, they make it there, plop their luggage on the porch, and walk in the door. As they walk in the door, behind the counter of the registration desk is Miss Eloise. She's a short, little, stodgy lady, gray hair with a bun, and Miss Eloise was the registrar of camp. And she says, boys, we're glad you're here at Silver Creek Camp. And they were excited. They were glad they were too. But before she took their money and their papers, they glanced over and they saw this big chest. It was looked like a treasure chest. It had all types of metal and ornate clasps and stuff on it. And Charlie whispered to Red, so that's where they keep all the camp money. So they paid their money, and she goes over and raises the top of the chest, and the boys got a glimpse inside of it. It was full of money. There was a lot of campers there that week, a lot of cash. And so the boys' money went in there. She comes back and says, boys, y'all are in Timber Ridge Cabin. And your counselor, we call him Uncle Jeff. He's a tall guy, about 6'6". You'll know him when you see him. Timber Ridge Cabin. Well, off they went to try to find it. They'd have to go past the flagpole, past the arts and craft building, up the trail. They could see in the distance the stables and the swimming pool over there and a lake nearby. And there they found it. They're almost there. But before they got there, they were coming past a cabin which was called Livingston Lodge. And out of Livingston Lodge, the door opened, and 7 boys just came running out of the cabin and surrounded them. As they surrounded them, they looked up at him and said, hey, how you doing? Charlie and Red trying to be friendly, meet some new guys. But one boy in the group was a lot taller than everybody else. And he had thick black hair, slicked back, and his hair was trimmed real tight on the sides. But it was real thick in the middle. And he had these squinty kind of looking eyes. Like he kind of looked at you like this. He was bigger. He was 12 years old. And he introduced himself and he said, my name is Mike. What's your name? They said, my name's Charlie. My name is Red. He says, my name is Mike. And I've been to camp 5 summers in a row. And Charlie said, awesome. And then he looked at him and he had this kind of tank top shirt on. And Mike had big muscles, kind of like Caleb's muscles. Like that. And big arms and shoulders. And Charlie said, where did you get that? He says, I lift weights. My friends back home call me Muscle Mike. I was kind of scared to hear him say that. And he said, I want you to know, I'm not scared of anybody. Nobody. And off they went. I guess that was kind of his group, Muscle Mike's group, that always hung out and always supported and said, encouraged him in anything he did. They were kind of scared of him too. And Charlie and Red said, I don't want to make him mad. He said, no, I don't want to make him mad. Finally, they just made it to their cabin. Timber Ridge Cabin was nestled up on a hill. And standing at the door was this tall young man, and it was Uncle Jeff. So they make it to the cabin, up the stairs. He says, come on in, boys. We're looking for a great week together here at camp. So they walk in, and there's only about 2 or 3 bunks taken. And he says, choose whatever bunk you want. Charlie and Red chose the 2 bunks near the front. And Red said, I want to sleep up top. Charlie says, no problem, I'll take the bottom bunk. And so they got all their stuff, their blanket and their sleeping bag out, put it up, put their luggage underneath, hung up their towel, got their Bible out, set everything up just like they wanted it. And it was dinner time. They heard the bell ring and off they went. When they got to dinner and lined up just outside the lodge, getting in line ready to eat, Charlie saw several people that he had met the year before. And they greeted one another. Hey, Jerry. Hi, Ed. How y'all doing? Good to see you again. They were excited to be back. And just then, Charlie felt a hand on his shoulder. and it was kind of a bigger hand, and it was kind of squeezing his shoulders just a little bit. And he turned around, and it was Muscle Mike. And Muscle Mike looks at him and says, "What's that on your shirt?" And he says, That's my Sunday school pen. I never missed a Sunday school." And Muscle Mike laughed at him. He said, "Sunday school? I don't go to Sunday school. That's for sissies. I don't go to Sunday school. All they do is talk about God, the Bible, little stories that aren't true. I don't go there." And Charlie said, "I do, and I believe what they say." And Red chimed in too. He says, "Yeah, it's important what the Bible says and how Jesus teaches us." He said, "Hey, slow down, boys. Don't try to preach to me." And then he looked up and he saw something on Charlie's hip. Back in the cabin when they unloaded their stuff, Charlie had taken his keys and undid his belt and slid the key ring up and then did his belt back, and he had him knocked on his hip. And Muscle Mike looked at him and said, "What's that on your hip?" He says, "Some keys I found. I found them in the river when I went fishing the other day." And Muscle Mike laughed again. "Those are just a bunch of junk." And he took the keys and just kind of flipped them so it would hit him on the side. Charlie, even though he was a lot smaller, that made him mad. He was wanting to fight back at him. But he remembered that verse that his Sunday school teacher had told him. You remember it? Love who? Love your enemies. Do what to those that hate you? Do good to those. What about those that curse you? Bless them. What about those that persecute you or say things bad against you? What do? Pray for them. And he began to think about that. Well, after the activities, after dinner, they went out and played on the athletic field some games together, duck, duck, goose, some real violent games like that. They played, what else? They played, one of their special games they love to play, Red Rover. Red Rover, Red Rover. And they just had a great time playing group games. Then they went back, got showers, had a time in the chapel. When Charlie got back to the cabin that night, he began to think, last summer camp wasn't like this. He had not met a guy that was kind of picking on him and kind of bullying him a little bit. So he was kind of wondering, what is camp going to be like this summer for me? Then he began to reflect back on those verses again. And it was like God was speaking to him. He says, "Charlie, there's something special I'm going to teach you this week. There's something special you're going to learn through where you find yourself, this situation, this young man that you've met. And I want you to listen to me. Listen to me." Well, that's our story for tonight. We're going to pick up again tomorrow night with our story. And let's find out what happens to Charlie and Red at Silver Creek Camp. All right. Thank y'all for your attention. Many of y'all have traveled a long distance. Many of you are tired.